Good evening. My name is Laura Creed, and I am the co-chair of the Shaker chapter of the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland. That's a tongue twister. Just wanted to say welcome to all of you. We're so glad that you're here. Just a few announcements before we get started. If you are a high school student and you need your government hours, where's Ann? Ann, are you in the audience? Oh, she's actually at the voter registration table, but I was going to tell everyone after the event, go to the voter registration table outside and she'll sign for your government hours. Which brings me to another point. If you need to register to vote, go to the voter registration table outside in the lobby. And finally, I just wanted to alert you to an upcoming forum that we're having November 13th at the library, and it's about increasing voter turnout. So again, welcome, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to Lee Tucker, who is our moderator tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lee Tucker, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. Welcome to the League of Women Voters Local Candidate Forum for the City of Shaker Heights. The format for the evening is going to be as follows. We're going to have an opening statement from the candidates. There will be about 2 minutes, and then there will be the question and answer session. Each of the candidates will limit their answers to 1 minute. In fairness to the audience, the candidates, and the moderators, we ask the audience to observe the following forum rules. Number 1, please turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate. As I stated, each of the candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. We ask the candidates to make their statements from the table. The timekeepers who are seated in the front will raise a yellow card when the candidate has 30 seconds remaining in his or her statement. And then the timekeepers will raise a red card at the end of the allotted time. The audience may submit written questions on note cards. Note cards for writing questions will be distributed to the audience during the forum. Questions may be addressed to one, several, or all candidates. The questions will be screened by the league screeners, and they will be submitted to them to avoid duplication and provide diversity of the questions, and make sure that the questions are readable, that they're appropriate, that like there are no attacks, and that the questions are relevant, like they're not addressed for like a federal level question, since this is regarding local candidates. Replies to questions are limited to 1 minute. Our timekeepers, the time will be strictly enforced. So just because we have so many candidates and we have to keep it moving because of the format tonight, the time I'll try to let you finish your statement, but if you're like running too far into your 1 minute answer, I will cut you off. If a question is posed to a specific candidate, but another candidate also wants to answer the question, you may answer that question as well. And the same 1 minute time limit applies. In order to maximize the time to candidates for answering, we ask the audience to avoid expressions of support or opposition to any candidate during the presentation of answers. This is an actual forum, it's not a debate, so there's like no rebuttals, etc. And that is it. We'll get started. We're going to start in alphabetical order with the candidate statements. We'll start with you, Mr. Cicarella.
Thank you. This is a mic check. Can everyone hear all right? Okay, good. Good evening. My name is Tom Cicarella, and for the past 43 years, I, along with my wife Ann, have been members or residents of Shaker Heights. I currently am a member of the board of the Shaker Heights Public Library and a citizen member of the Finance and Administration Committee, where I've been able over the past couple of years to learn about the budget process and the finances for the city. For 22 years, I was a member of the board of directors of the Greater Cleveland Habitat for Humanity, having served 2 terms as president, and I'm proud to say that during the fiscal meltdown a few years ago, I, along with 3 other board members, saved the organization, enabling it to continue its great mission for the community. I have been appointed by the juvenile court as a guardian ad litem for abused and neglected children, and received accommodation from the court for the work that I did in protecting children under my care. I have been an ongoing participant in the Cleveland Legal Aid Society's Brief Advice Program, providing legal services to people in desperate need of those services, but who otherwise weren't able to get them. For many years and on many teams, I was a coach for Shaker Youth Baseball, and I'll tell you, I just love it when one of the kids or a parent comes up to me and reminds me that they played left field on the Bulldogs. I think what separates me from the other candidates is my background in commercial finance. I have helped using that expertise to grow corporations, partnerships, trusts, foundations, private equity firms, and I believe that as a result of that, I know developers, and I can tell you that I know their playbook. I know what they're thinking before they think it, and I believe that I can use that expertise to help our Director of Economic Development, Mayor, and Council enhance the prospect of economic development in the city. I appreciate your coming here tonight to listen to us talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Malone?
Thank you, and thanks to everybody for being here tonight. My name is Sean Malone. I'm a member of Shaker Heights City Council, finished at my first term. I really enjoy the work, and I'm here to respectfully ask for your vote for a second term on council. I grew up in Shaker, went to this public schools, kindergarten through 12th grade, got a law degree from the Ohio State University. My undergrad was at the College of Worcester. I've been practicing law for about 16 years. I serve as a mediator, helping to bring people together and resolve disputes. My wife and I live in the Boulevard neighborhood. We're raising our 4 children, sending them to the Shaker Public Schools as well. On council, I've served as the chair of the Finance Committee. I have pushed for streamlined meetings, updates to the city's policy on the use of its reserves, helped create a risk management task force, supported economic development in all commercial districts of the city, closer partnership, advocated for closer partnership between SHDC, the Shaker Heights Development Corporation, and the city. I've also tried to be as responsive as possible to resident requests, posting online summaries of key committee meetings and votes. But I'm most proud of 2 things that I've done on council. The first is my work as chair of the Sustainable Shaker Task Force, which is now a full-fledged committee after about a year or 2 in which I planned and led meetings around the issues of sustainability. And the second is my work as chair of something called the Human Relations Task Force, a group whose mission is simply to try to make Shaker a more welcoming place. And it's that work that I'd really like to try to make the focus of a second term on council. So while I want to continue supporting economic development, making Shaker a more affordable place to live, a better place to do business, a leader on regional issues, I really just want everybody to know that they're welcome in this city, whether they've been living here their whole lives, but don't feel as connected as they would like, or whether they're moving here for the first time. So our Human Relations Task Force is trying to encourage face-to-face interactions, respectful conversations with neighbors, and fun community events that bring people together all over the city. It's been a privilege to work with people on that task force. It's been a privilege to serve on City Council the last 4 years, and I respectfully ask for your vote for a second term. Thank you.
Ms. Moore?
Thank you. Good evening. And thanks to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this candidate election forum tonight. My name is Nancy Moore. I'm an incumbent member of City Council, running for re-election for a 4-year term on November 5th. For those of you who do not know me, I am a 37-year resident of Shaker. I live in the Sussex area with my husband of 50 years, John, who is Director of Neonatology for Metro Health System. We have 4 grown children, and all Shaker grads, and 8 grandchildren, unfortunately all of whom live all over the nation and the world, but none in Shaker Heights. This has become my extended family, and this is why I continue to serve this community, which is fundamentally a community that shares my values, and that I want to be the community of choice for the next generation. In my life, I've worked both as an educator and a freelance writer, but my best job by far has been service, public service to this community. I have first served as an elected official 8 years on the Shaker Heights Board of Education, and then I served for the last 16 years on Shaker Heights City Council. I serve you, and I continue that service because I care so deeply about our community, and I am grateful for all that it has given me and my family. Secondly, I want Shaker to continue to be the community of choice for our children and their children, and I believe it will take all of us working together to make that happen. So why should you vote for Nancy Moore for City Council another time? First, I have length of experience, 16 years worth on City Council, and I believe that with a new city administration, it's helpful to have some seniority on council. I have depth of experience, 24 years worth, both on the school board and on City Council. I've served as chair or member of every single city committee, and I know our community. I will work for you full-time, and I will return every letter, email, and voicemail you send me. Thank you, and please vote for Nancy Moore for City Council on November 5th.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. Thank you all for taking time out of your evening to come learn more about your candidates for council. My name is Carmella Williams. I'm running for City Council because I would like to join the efforts to position Shaker for the future while maintaining the things that make Shaker special to us. My hope is to provide a new voice and an additional perspective. After serving in the Navy, I moved to Shaker 20 years ago because I wanted a quiet community with a good school district where I could raise my son. And I'm proud to say that I received that and so much more. I became part of a community. Shaker is a community that a single mom just out of the Navy or a CEO can call home. I have put what I've learned over the years about commitment, teamwork, and service to work here. I've served as co-president of Moreland on the Move Community Association, vice president of the library. I am co-president of the high school's Education and Enrichment Committee for the PTO and a member of Leading for Equity. I also serve on the city's Human Relations Task Force, the Superintendent's Transition Advisory Team, the District Strategic Planning Team, and the Community Advisory Committee with the Police Department. I have engaged at every level I could and worked with leaders from our neighborhoods, city government, schools, and library to address our shared needs. I'm running for council to put what I've learned from my experiences to work for Shaker in a broader way. I respectfully ask for your vote, and I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Thank you very much, and thank you all for attending this forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters. I am Earl Williams Jr. I have been a Shaker resident for 25 years. I am married, and I had 4 children, 3 of whom graduated from the Shaker schools and are now productive citizens. I have been in 2 branches of the service, both the Air Force and the Army. I'm an attorney. I was a public defender and a county prosecutor. I've been an investment banker and also a licensed broker with several finance firms. And I also am an arbitrator with the Financial Regulation Board for Securities. I am seeking a 5th term. I believe that for the last 16 years, I've attracted or helped to attract new businesses and promoted the prosperity of our existing businesses. I preserved and promoted high-quality housing, and I'm continuing to support the excellence of all the Shaker schools and students. I think those are the big areas that need to be consistently and very strongly supported. I believe that the Shaker City Council has offered me the opportunity to see in the last 16 years both the good times and the bad times when it comes to local government. I have seen Shaker through it all absolutely have a miraculous opportunity to not only set an example to be successful, but also to encourage others to do the same thing. I'm asking for your vote on November the 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll get started with our questions. I'm going to start in the way you're seated, but as the questions go on, they'll be asked randomly. They won't always So, the first question is, what 2 or 3 factors do you see as critical to achieve lasting economic growth for our city? Mr. Cicarella.
Well, I would say the first factor that I see is that we have to have a plan that includes additional space for the city. And there are varieties of ways of looking at that. I think that we ought to consider the Lee Road, Chagrin area, but I think that we ought to consider, because of the fact that it is so important to us to have increased economic development, I think that we ought to consider the moonshot type of approach, at least consider it. And I've talked with others about this. One possibility is considering a merger with Highland Hills, for example. And I think that we ought to at least consider something like that. I don't know whether we'd be able to do it, but that may generate other possibilities. I think that the important thing for economic development is to make sure it's bottom-up development, not top-down development. Bottom-up development is where you have demand. Top-down is where you have build it and they will come.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Malone?
I'd first start by saying we need to focus on Northeast Ohio's economy as a whole, because as that goes, so goes Shaker. We're so dependent on our neighbors in the city of Cleveland, in the city of Warrensville, Cleveland Heights. We can't keep thinking of ourselves in isolation, so I'd like to see us continue to build partnerships with elected officials and appointed officials in neighboring communities, the city of Cleveland. I also think we can make better office space available to businesses in Shaker. We are starting now for the first time in the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years, to encourage businesses to move into Shaker, but we still don't have some of the modern, aside from the Van Aken development, some of the modern offices that would attract more businesses to the city. But again, I think economic growth in Shaker will be dependent upon Northeast Ohio's growth as a whole. So that means all of us in our day jobs, in our volunteer efforts, we need to make sure Cleveland's young people have opportunities as they head out into the world.
Thank you.
Point of clarification, was the question what 2 factors are there that will achieve lasting economic growth for the state?
No, for the city.
For the city. I believe that one of the most important things in economic growth is threefold. First, I believe we have to have a team that is united within the city that focuses on economic development. We have such a team now composed of economic development director, our mayor, our ED specialist, and our economic development committee. We also have a private entity known as the Shaker Heights Development Corporation. I think these 3 entities together, working together, can do very much focus on the nodes within the city and the 2 major business districts. And to me, that's a good start that needs to be continued, and I hope it will.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
Thank you. So I would say that 2 or 3 opportunities that we have are to focus on increasing commercial development along South Lee Road, to complement what we're doing at the Van Aken district. I would also suggest exploring the possibility of live home or live home work opportunities for home-based businesses, which I think would be very complementary to what we have at the dealership. I think that's it, just those 2.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Williams?
Thank you. I know that after chairing a nonprofit, the Mount Pleasant Now Development Corporation, for about 15 years, I know what it takes to actually build something out of really blight. The building that houses the Senior Services Center, 138th and Kinsman, was built by my group. I chaired that board, and I think that in Shaker, we probably need to consider more projects that will attract state dollars to actually help us not only with our development, but in our neighboring communities. The state is interested in more collaboration in that regard. I think we can do that. However, we need to understand that housing is our big economic engine in Shaker. And while we can shift the tax burden to business, we can't really shift enough of it. 87% of our tax base is in housing. About 10 to 15% is in the commercial district, but it's a big 13%. Those employees who actually work in those buildings are paying the lion's share of the income tax. So that type of attraction we can work on,
Okay.
and that's what I'd be doing.
Thank you. Next question. I'll start with Mr. Malone. What areas of city service could be improved, and how would you do it?
Well, I think we should always be looking to improve every single one of our departments. I would say building and housing is in the process of making improvements, but I still think we have a ways to go there. Recently, the city went through a lengthy process after consultations with the mayor, council, city staff, to update our policies on how we address housing inspections, and we're trying to make them more objective. The violations that are assessed by the inspectors more objective and less nitpicky. Because I think that's probably the #1 complaint, other than taxes, that all of us get when we go to block parties is, why is the housing department doing X, Y, Z? I think our point of sale inspection program is well-intentioned and it is a valuable program, but I think it can be made more common sense, and I know we're in the process of doing that. We're also trying to update the technology in the building and housing department so that it will be done in real time on electronic devices, and the inspectors can consult with people back in the office in an effort to make that process more objective.
Thank you. Ms. Moore?
I believe that one area that can really continue to be improved, we've made good strides, but we need to make more, is the areas of our infrastructure needs. That's specifically roads and sewers. This is what our Public Works Department is charged with, and our Planning Department, but I do want to emphasize that I think within the scope of our revenues, we are doing an incredible job of stretching our resources. But right now, we have many more needs for infrastructure repair, that's sewers and roads, than we have money. And we need to strategize for how this is going to be tackled. We also have a lineup of SSOs, sanitary sewer overflows, that are often the subject of federal consent decrees. We need to make sure we do not end up in a federal consent decree. We also need to work together with the sewer district and strategize on funding these repairs. And finally, we need to look at ways to supply revenue that will be ongoing for the next 10 years or more to solve the many repairs that need to be done in both areas.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
Thank you. I agree with Councilman Malone in that ensuring that the inspection process between housing and the building departments are consistent for both commercial and residential properties would be one area that would be ideal for improvement, and I know the city has done some organizational restructuring to address that issue. The other idea I would have would be suggestion I would have would be to increase the collaboration between the schools, library, and the city to improve services, to find ways where they can collaborate and maximize the use of tax dollars. Thank you.
And Mr. Williams?
Thank you. For those of you that have gone to the League of Women Voters website and have looked at the candidates' positions on 4 questions, I submitted answers, and 2 of my questions were actually left off, or only a piece of them were actually recorded. In response to this question, I wanted to say that Shaker Heights is continuing to promote and implement, where available, collaboration with the like-minded neighboring communities to share services with our police, fire, and public works departments. Many of our services that were once exclusive to our city have now been designated to allow collaboration with dispatching, deployment, providing transportation, and correction facilities. Our water and sewer services are regional in ownership, but we retain the professional consulting selection when the needs provide maintenance. The state of Ohio continues to preempt local input and arguably ignore home rule when regulating our financial abilities to meet these needs. As the headwinds of federal and state changes through the years change the approaches and strategies of past studies and citizen interaction that Shaker has fostered, the need remains to adhere to the goal of attracting and retaining the best talent. We are doing what we can to come into a period where we can meet all of our needs, but because those needs change and require different solutions, it will always be a challenge.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with,
Cicarella.
I'm sorry. Mr. Cicarella.
I'm right next to the podium and you were looking over my head. That's all right. Thanks, Sean. I would say that as a result of my participation as a citizen member of the Finance Committee, I've gotten to know a lot of, maybe all of the department heads. And I think that they're actually terrific. And in terms of efficiency, I think they're probably pretty darn good. I wouldn't be able to get into the granular aspects and second guess them. But I think that what we ought to do is do cost per resident analysis of the city services, find out where we're higher than other cities in the region, find out where we're lower, and figure out whether some improvements could be made there. I think that the long and short is what we need for improved city services is more money. We have lost, since the financial meltdown, about 300 residences alone. I mean, think of that. How many fewer people are paying taxes. And we lost the estate tax. So the city has less money to do more, and that just ultimately doesn't work out.
Thank you. The next question is, and I'll start with Ms. Moore. What are the top 3 priorities for environmental sustainability in Shaker?
Well, the top priorities for environmental sustainability in Shaker are first of all, we've created a sustainability, we positioned for a sustainability director. We've created a sustainability committee staffed by that director and by council and city members. We have posted a sustainability initiatives on the city website. We're one of only 15 cities nationwide to receive a Leads for Small Cities grant, which will enable us to have new energy efficient standards. We will soon be enacting legislation to update our stormwater code. That would decrease the stormwater runoff. We are a member of, and have been for 16 years, of the Donebrook Watershed Partnership. For 16 years, we've been working to protect and restore the Doan Brook, which is a major tributary of Lake Erie, which is our greatest natural resource. We have internally a green team established, working to increase sustainable practices in our city operations. We have now 78% pesticide-free grounds within the city. Rust Belt Riders will soon offer residential composting, and an electric car rental program will soon be available with charging stations.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
I would say commuting, people-powered transportation, and energy efficiency. Our access to public transportation is a selling point that we should raise to the top. We're close in proximity to downtown and other job centers, so that's something I feel we need to capitalize on. People-powered transportation is something that's near and dear to my heart as someone who has taken up bike riding again after a number of years that I won't disclose since I had ridden a bike. I think that is something that would promote connecting neighborhoods, connecting neighbors, but also be environmentally friendly. And Shaker has a very strong but old housing stock. finding ways to make these homes more energy efficient will help us be more attractive.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Thank you. The sustainability question was also cut off, so I'll give you that. The Sustainability Committee that's chaired by Councilman Sean Malone has met to implement steps to create a plan to gradually introduce practices that foster efforts to achieve a green community. The areas of our city life that were selected were transportation, buildings, contracting and procurement, recycling, infrastructure, landscaping, housing, emergency preparedness, and resident business engagements. Several of those programs and areas are not really within the capacity of the city to actually affect. However, we have been reducing the use of harmful pesticides and also supporting sustainable improvement. Our building and housing department is becoming more digital and using more handheld devices and trying to assess what these inspection issues are for many of our houses. The city has now declared a policy of collaborating with neighboring communities in the areas of transportation, emergency preparedness, and infrastructure. So at this point, I'm told to stop.
Thank
Thank you.
Mr. Cicarella?
Thank you. Well, my wife really ought to answer this question for me. She's a beekeeper and just put on the pollinator symposium, so she would be more adept at providing a good response. But I would say two things. The first is the Shaker Rapid. We've got to get people back on the Rapid. When I was first a resident of Fernway, the Rapids, there were 2 cars and they were packed. And we don't have that now, and we ought to get more people and advertise it and do everything we can to get people back on it. I know Sean rides with me. The second thing we ought to do is have people download a carbon footprint calculator. I think the burden ought to be on all of us, not the city so much. The city can help and it can advertise, but I think the burden ought to be on the individuals to figure out what their carbon footprint is and try to adjust that. And I think that what we could have is a dialogue among people in the city to talk about how each individual is addressing that. So with those 2 possibilities, I think that we would be dramatically better in terms of sustainability.
Thank you.
And I have the advantage and disadvantage of going last. There's a lot of great ideas been discussed. I'll just throw out a handful of others. Just piggybacking on what Tom just said, I think to encourage RTA use, we're going to need to do something on the green line eventually. And I just throw that out there. I don't know if it's feasible. I don't know how residents would react, but I do think we need to encourage, particularly on that line, either some sort of mixed-use development at the end or whether it's housing or commercial, out at the green road line. So it's something to think about for the future. Second, I'd say probably the top thing we can do is promote renewable energy. And so that could be solar panels on the Public Works building, or perhaps solar panels bid out in conjunction with the schools and libraries so that we get a lower price. I know Michael Peters, our sustainability coordinator, is exploring that possibility. We're doing a solar itemization of all the facilities in the city. So I would say those 2 things are priorities. We could also make the city more walkable and bikeable. We've talked about that a bit. There's a Lee Road diet that's coming, hopefully, that will make that street similar to the way it is in Cleveland Heights, 1 lane in each direction with a dedicated bike lane off the side. It's a dangerous place to ride right now, but a lot of good work going around with sustainability. I'll throw in there recycling and reusing. Rather than recycling, we can get more residents to reuse their materials and throw out less. I think that's another thing we could do.
Thank you. This question is for candidate Mr. Cicarella. What can the city council do to make better use of the city's revenue?
Well, I addressed some of this in a prior comment. I think that largely what we have is a concern about the tax burden. I think that on a granular basis, the department heads are doing a good job. I think on a more global basis, there can always be a dispute as to whether an expense is worth it or not. A great example is garbage collection at the back of the house. Some people like it, some don't. I personally do. There would be an example of how you could save money or not, depending on the cost-benefit analysis I just mentioned. I think that fundamentally what we need to do, though, is increase the tax base. And as I said, I think that the key there is economic development, which is just a fancy way of saying we need people from outside the city to help us pay our bills. Whether that's people who are buying goods in the city or people who are working here or putting businesses in town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for the purpose of this question, I guess I'll set aside the notion of getting more revenue and increasing the tax base and having more businesses in Shaker, because ideally, I think that's a solution to this issue of doing more with what we have. But we are constrained, and I think one thing we can do a better job of is attracting and retaining top-notch employees who will look for efficiencies inside the government. And I know the mayor has been doing a great job. We've got a new economic development director. We're looking for a new finance director. Once we have those folks on board, I think it will be a lot easier to continue to modernize our internal infrastructure within the city. Our risk management task force has identified a bunch of cost-saving measures that we could pursue. So I think there are opportunities for efficiencies inside the city, but ultimately, as Tom alluded to, we need to bring more revenue into the city. We've lost a lot of revenue percentage-wise with the loss of the estate tax and other state aid. So we're still in the process of rebuilding that over the long term.
Thank you.
Outside of increasing our revenues, which everyone has already talked about and which is definitely needed given that our revenues have been reduced by a number of measures taken at the state level and at the national level, we need to also seek additional creative ways for regional collaboration. I've worked for 16 years on the Donebrook Watershed Partnership. Attracting and retaining people to our area has as much to do with our greenness and our resources, natural resources, as anything else. Our parklands, and through regional collaboration in this way and many other ways, we can gain efficiencies. I think we're being very aggressive in that. I also think that we're considering merit pay in some cases for our directors. These are directors who manage our budget, their departmental budgets very wisely, and look for ways to create alliances, interdepartmental alliances, and reduce costs. And I think that where there is that incentive, it will pay off for us. So I really believe that we're headed in the right direction, but it's going to take a lot of hard work and creativity given our budget reductions.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
So I would say, and I think someone alluded to it earlier, first let me say I think our city does a great job of managing what we have, and it's doing the best it can with what it has. So with that being said, someone mentioned earlier that we need more people. We need to recruit more people. We've lost quite a bit in population. So I think the city's doing a great job with the revenue it has, but if we can bring in more people, that grows our base, that increases our revenue, and it makes things a little bit easier for us.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
I would continue to implement our plan that has been developed by the Communication and Marketing Committee, utilizing the Shaker Heights website, social media and community events held with the 6 neighborhoods, that type of community media, to exhibit our community's diversity, quality of housing, family orientation, and care and concern for our single and elderly citizens. We've worked hard as a city government to identify through many ways our qualities that are desired by those seeking to relocate here. I think our tax rate is mentioned by some as an issue, but the rate is directly tied to the need to maintain a quality and competitive school system through the state-mandated property tax. Our income taxes are actually levied on our people who work, and we do get a revenue stream there. We can attract more people, but we have to understand that those people who are attracted and do move into Shaker, if they're working in another community but living here, we're only going to get about half of what they bring in, and we don't give a credit for where they work. So at that point, we have to consider what we have and what we're able to actually increase to generate revenue. And we're limited because the state has taken away a lot of our resources.
Thank you. Next question, we're changing the subject slightly, but on the same vein. Did I cover everybody? Yeah, okay. What can be done about houses in foreclosure and houses which are not being kept up? I'll start with Ms. Williams.
Okay, so this subject is near and dear to my heart as a resident of Moreland. Our neighborhood was hit hard by the housing foreclosure and the housing crisis. What's being done now is the city is enforcing the nuisance abatement and housing and building codes to address blighted homes. Where they can be saved, they're saved, and if they need to be demolished, they're being demolished. I think one of the things that the city should consider is increasing housing education for residents, trying to get into a situation early to prevent a foreclosure, and also increase homeowner awareness and market those homes.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I really think at this point, we are probably doing as best we can, but to do more, some of what we are talking about in the area of housing is going to require the time and some understanding of the trends of both the housing as a economic engine, and also the people who want to live in Shaker are going to be able to, one, desire us, and two, afford what they desire. As was said earlier, we've lost about 300 citizens. And back in 2011, we had the plan for our development that dealt primarily with housing. And we knew then that we had to do quite a bit in the area of making housing sustainable and in a position to be desired for all of the different citizen groups that are in Shaker. And that's from the families all the way up to our aged, the people who want to age in place. And right now, we are definitely having, I think, a resurgence, especially in the southwestern area of the city, where young families are moving back in, and we're now planning to build more housing and more locations for those who are more increasingly wanting to age in place.
Thank you. Mr. Cicarella?
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned in my opening statement, for 22 years I was on the board of the Greater Cleveland Habitat for Humanity. And what we found during the Fiscal mess 10 years ago was we couldn't build houses anymore. The cost value was such that as soon as you built the house, when the residents took possession, it was an under-market house. So that didn't work. So what we did was we ended up rehabbing houses. And what I've heard from a lot of people is, well, you know, a lot of these houses that are in foreclosure are so far gone they can't be rehabbed. From a Habitat's point of view, and I'm not saying we use Habitat, but I'm talking about the model, they can be rehabbed. There is, from Habitat's point of view, no house that can't be rehabbed. And so at the very least, I would consider that. If we can't do rehabs for some reason, we can turn them into green spaces. This is sort of a double header. We not only take care of the problem with the house, but we deal with sustainability. Put a lot of plants, put bushes, you know, and greenery, and turn it into a sustainable parcel of land.
Thank you. Mr. Malone?
First, I'll start by saying that actually Shaker has done a really good job compared to a lot of other inner-ring suburbs. Our neighborhood revitalization director, Carmella Williams, has a great program, Shaker Renovators program. We do renovate a lot of houses. We have demoed a lot of houses too. And Bill Hanson, the housing commissioner, does a cost-benefit analysis. The city takes a lot of effort into trying to rehab where possible and demo in the worst-case scenarios. But the housing market in Shaker, people will start to buy in foreclosed neighborhoods again when the whole housing market in Shaker improves. And I think we do that by making Shaker more affordable. I talked about this in my opening statement, and by that I mean we lessen the tax burden on people. We're cognizant of the fact that we want this to be a place not just for very wealthy people, but for people to move into the Moreland neighborhood, the Lomond neighborhood, the Fernway neighborhood, where we have great old houses that can be renovated. We want everyone to move into this city. And I would say that we also have a neat program, the name of it is escaping me, but we offer consulting services to help people stay in their homes with financial management. A lot of people, particularly elderly, disabled people, might not have the financial wherewithal to, negotiate a payment plan with their bank to stay in their home. So the city is also trying to keep people in their homes and avoid foreclosures where possible.
Thank you. Ms. Moore?
Yes, I'd like to say that I've worked in the area of housing now for all the 37 years we've lived here. First as a volunteer, interested in improving housing, especially housing in the south of Van Aken, where I've lived for also that entire time. And I now work almost, I would say 2/3 of my time is working advocating for seniors. The problem with foreclosure after the mortgage foreclosure crisis hit full stream was that people had limited income and limited sometimes financial literacy. Fell into arrears, and sometimes the easiest thing to do is not pay your mortgage, not pay your taxes, both of which can make you go into foreclosure. So what we have done in the city is we've created alliances and programs with ESOP, which is an acronym for a group that is basically coming into town and doing counseling with seniors. And once they gain their trust, then they're trying to figure out how they can restructure their loans, how they can basically consolidate their debt. That's very helpful. We also have Carol and Peterson grants every year to seniors that, in which if you couldn't afford to replace your whole roof, but you might be able to do it partially each year through this grant.
Thank
we
you.
use those.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think we have time to squeeze in another question or two. The next subject is lead abatement. No candidate has mentioned lead abatement as a priority. Shaker has neighborhoods with lead in their water. How can the city cooperate with schools for lead testing? And I'll start with you, Mr. Williams.
Yes, that is not only a problem, but it's a scourge on the community. The lead abatement program is one that requires that the older housing, particularly those that are south of Van Aken, actually have the opportunity to look at the useful life of a lot of the plumbing, look at the useful life of a lot of those intakes that bring water in and also take water out. We are probably in the same circumstances as some of the more low-income communities when it comes to lead. Those are also older communities. The hospital systems normally test children from the ages of birth to 5 years old to see just how they actually have tested to see what their lead levels are and how that would affect their educational opportunities.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Cicarella?
Well, I think the key for lead abatement is, as you sort of indicated in the question, to collaborate. I think that we need to collaborate with, the city needs to collaborate with the schools, and I think that we also need to collaborate with the library. I think the library is a great resource and might be used to catch people who would otherwise fall through the cracks. Many of the children, for example, might not be in the school system, but might be in a position to use the library. So I think that we ought to have collaboration. And I think that we ought to be able to turn this problem into a benefit. I think that what we ought to do is team up with universities who are interested in analyzing the science and could perhaps provide the testing and essentially the funding through grants to complete the testing process for all of the kids.
Thank you. Mr. Malone?
My understanding is that Shaker's water, I'm not aware of there being a lead problem with it. If there is, I'd certainly like to know about it, and that's something very serious. We do have, I think, we had a presentation about this several years ago. Of course, we have old homes, we have lead paint in a lot of homes, and I understand that our problem is not as bad as other communities. We do see elevated levels of lead in some children in our community. I think this is another example of why we need, as much of a pain as it is sometimes for a lot of Shaker residents, we need a home inspection program. We need a point of sale inspection so that a lot of these hazards can be cleaned up. It's a huge problem, though, especially for the city of Cleveland, and it's going to require probably state or eventually federal money. I know the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland is doing a lot of great work around this issue. Hopefully, we can piggyback on some of what the city of Cleveland is doing. But again, I'm not aware of there being a lead problem with Shaker's Water. If somebody knows differently, please let us know.
I've worked for a long time on the issue of lead paint and lead abatement in our housing. And just FYI, there are state and federal monies available for lead testing, and we have done this when Director Scott Frank was our medical director. We have levels, we have maps of all of the areas of Shaker Heights and the lead testing of students in our school district. As revealed by those tests, we do collaborate with the schools. We know where the lead is elevated. It is not just in South Shaker, make no mistake about it. We do identify, we do require lead certification training of all painters who are registered in the city of Shaker Heights. But that said, it is really up to homeowners to ask when they hire a painter, are they lead paint certified? And do they have are they practicing proper abatement practices when they remove the paint? And last but not least, I just want to say that lead paint is, a lot of people think it's all in the paint. We all have lead casements in our windows, our double hung sash windows. Every time you raise and lower those sashes, there's lead dust that is emitted and it comes off of those. So it's not just a question of removing your old paint or encapsulating it if that's the case. It's also a question of, I'm sorry, but of changing out your windows.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
Thank you. There have been great comments here already, so there's not much more for me to add. The only thing I would add on to what's been said is that we should work with the county, and we should also emphasize the importance of education, because so often in these situations, people don't know that there's a danger until they ask the right question or someone points it out to them, and unfortunately, it may be too late. So it would behoove us to get ahead of the problem as much as possible.
Thank you. And due to time, that concludes this portion of the forum. Thank you, candidates.
Thank you.
Let's give them a round of applause.